Welcome back to True Story. This is Jon Gibson. Today joining me is Jon Thomas, the founder and executive director of Tapcancerout. Jon, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine, sincerely. I could literally torpedo you with Tapcancerout questions and anecdotes and stuff, but I prepared myself today, and I brought bullet points to keep myself on track.
Cool.
Which is for the benefit of both of us, because this is about you and not about me. And with that, honestly, I would love to, if you don't mind, just sort of let's start this off by just kind of detailing a little bit about your BJJ journey. Like in my research, I read that you started in maybe 2008, Black Belt 2018. Is that right?
It sounds right.
Sounds right. Okay. But we're in 2021 now. So, I mean, to as much as you're comfortable, I'd love to learn about like what attracted you to BJJ, your academy, and man, that journey. That's a big journey.
Yeah. So I played all sorts of sports growing up, and in high school and then in college, settled on volleyball. So I played that for probably 10 years or so. But post-college, it was increasingly difficult to play. My college teammates sort of scatter after they graduate, and it's not as easy as just joining like a men's basketball rec league in your town or,
Right.
competitive volleyball. You have to travel around to different tournaments, not unlike jiu-jitsu. But imagine if for every jiu-jitsu tournament, you had to find 6 other guys, specifically a setter, 2 middle hitters, all the pieces have to fit. Somebody flakes out. So it was getting difficult. And there was one year, I think 2007, where I only played one tournament the entire year. Wow. And then I was like, all right, you know what? Like I need something more. I wanted to do more than just, I would still go to the gym and stuff to stay active, but I needed a sport sort of in my life. And I had become a UFC fan, like most guys of a certain age did around that time, especially when the WEC was on the Versus Network and you could watch, Uriah Faber was doing all this crazy stuff. All these little guys, the 125, 135, 145, who didn't have a home in the UFC, they were doing crazy things. So, I remember telling myself, like, I want to get fit like them, but I don't want to get punched in the face.
I get it.
So, I don't want to climb into the cage, but I want that sort of workout. I want to be part of like a team. So I sort of just stumbled upon jiu-jitsu and the idea of having a team and teammates and stuff and representing a school. But when it came to competing, I didn't necessarily need anyone to be with me. I didn't even need a coach to be with me. All I needed was myself, and I could just sign on the dotted line and compete. So it left behind the volleyball baggage of needing all of those other people. So it sounded perfect to me. So I, at the time, there weren't a lot of jiu-jitsu options around me in Connecticut. So I just picked out of a hat. There were 2 schools, sort of 20 to 30 minutes in either direction. And I just picked one. And it was called Ultimate MMA. And I went up there, and at the time, like most jiu-jitsu schools, it was in like a garage, not someone's house garage, but like, a warehouse garage type place, no air conditioning, one big sort of blue mat area, and then another area actually on the other side of the wall. So, this was August of 2008. So it was scorching hot. I mean, it was so uncomfortable to even walk in there. And I was like, this is perfect. This is what I want. I want to suffer in these walls. I want to get rid of all this weight. And you're learning, self-defense and it's learning a new sport. It's like learning a new language. So it sounded cool to me. And so I signed up right there in the spot. And then off I went. And, pandemic aside, I didn't miss more than a week or two of training over the next 10, 11 years
Wow,
or
amazing.
so. I wasn't like a 7-day a week guy or a 5-day a week guy. I was like a 2-day a week guy.
Yeah.
But I just never stopped going. And, I was the cliche white belt who never quit. Like I was nothing special. I did try to compete as much as I could. I wasn't overly successful. I was pretty average when I won some tournaments. I lost a lot. But so that was my journey. There was a couple school changes in there because I moved, throughout the state, switched jobs and things like that. I think it was 2018, 2018, because this will be my 3rd year of being a black belt. So I'll get my first degree in October.
Man.
And that's also the good thing about black belt, even though I haven't trained for like almost a
year.
You're
there.
It doesn't matter. It's just time.
Yeah.
And so I'll get that first degree in October. So, so I got my black belt under Luigi Mondelli and the American Top Team in Connecticut.
Cool.
And so I was never like an instructor. I sort of guest taught a few classes when my instructor couldn't be there, but I was nothing special. I was just a guy who worked and did jiu-jitsu on the side and competed here and there. But it fulfilled that competition part, and it was great that I didn't have to sort of depend on anyone else. And competition was admittedly terrifying for me, but it was like it was something I forced myself to do because I always had this recurring experience that I would still have to this day. So like when I would leading up to the tournament, and especially when I would get to the tournament, I'd be terrified. I'd be like wishing that it was just over. I'd be jealous of the people that were walking out of the tournament when I was walking in. Like I hated every second of it. Once I got onto the mat, all of that disappeared. I was never like nervous in a match, because you just have to focus on what the hell's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And then as soon as it was over, win or lose, I was like, oh my God, I need to do this again. When's the next tournament? I want to do it really quick. Especially if I lost, I was like, I need another tournament next week. I need another shot at this. Like I want to do it. I want to do it. Sign up for the next one. And then all over again. Then I'm like, why did I sign up for this? This sucks. I'm terrified. I'm just going to lose and all this stuff. And then rinse and repeat. And,
man, you captured that so perfectly, that roller coaster of emotions. At least for me, it's the same exact experience. And then it's almost like, it's like literally the moment I touch, it's gone. As overwhelming as that was. So that's, man, just listening to you detail that, I felt chills because, man, I understand that completely from that exact experience. Switching gears just a little, because it's all related. And I want to comment on this really quick too. I think it's so cool. You're obviously like, I think jiu-jitsu attracts individuals a lot, and it also attracts people. Maybe like for me, one of the things that attracted me was still that community of that team, and sort of you touched on that as well. But I thought it was so cool that you had the parallel of being an individual from volleyball, and you had these frustrations, people flake, all those sort of scenarios you detailed, and then jiu-jitsu was able to sort of provide you that independence of all those frustrations, and then still provide you with that outlet. I don't know. That's really, I never would have imagine. Then also to have found it in your 20s, it sounds like, too.
I was 28. Yeah,
man, that's amazing. That's really cool. That's really, really cool. So again, switching gears to that, I really want to know, obviously I'm pretty involved as an ambassador with Tapcancerout, but I would love to learn more about sort of the why, like behind Tapcancerout, what inspired Tapcancerout. And maybe we'll start there. What inspired you to say, hey, I have a full-time job and a life, and then all of a sudden I'm going to transition into forming a nonprofit? How did this happen?
So, we've all been touched by cancer. I am no different. I've had a number of relatives and close friends lose their battle to cancer, win in their battle with cancer. So it was definitely like the overarching cause that I was always active in. In 2007, I think, my wife and I did a half marathon with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society called Team in Training. And so you sign on the dotted line. You're committed to raising $1,000, whether it comes off your credit card or, you get other people to donate. So we each raised $1,000. In return, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society would, get your bib to the race and a hotel room the night before. There's all these resources before, to actually help you train, all sorts of things. So we did that. It's funny, Becky, my wife, but I ran like a little bit. I did 5Ks here and there, but I wasn't a runner. I didn't do it every day. And she didn't run at all. And she is admittedly the more accomplished athlete in the family, but she played Division I volleyball. I was just like a club volleyball guy in college, but she was not a runner. She hated it. She hated it. And so I remember that first time we ran together, we were just supposed to run a mile. And then I lied to her and I told her it was a mile, but it was actually 1.3 miles or something. And when she found out at the end, she wanted to kill me. And then fast forward 3 months later or something, she's running a half marathon, and we both did. And it was awesome. But to that end, we hate running. And in general, unless you run, golf, swim, or bike, there's not a lot of opportunities out there for you to use your passion to create impact in a cause that you want to. So that was always the cause I cared about, but I really wanted to figure out a way to do it that is fun for me, selfishly enough. In 2010, I was actually out in San Diego at the Classy Awards, which are sort of the Academy Awards for nonprofits.
Okay.
And so it's a really special event, black tie optional event. And they were awarding, nonprofit of the year, volunteer of the year, all these sorts of things, not only nonprofits, but for-profits that were being philanthropic. Also, it was just a really cool event that I'd never seen before. And you start to hear the stories and meet the people that are really making a change in the world. Right. And we live in our, everyday bubbles, and we don't really have these conversations or meet these people very much. Like you see the nonprofits out there and you hear about them, but to be stuck in a room with 500 change makers, and I'm just there because my buddy started this company that has fundraising software and was hosting the event. It was actually very uncomfortable for me in these cocktail party conversations when they're like, oh yes, I'm the founder of Charity Water, or Team Rubicon, Barbells for Boobs. I gave up this financial career to build houses in Tanzania. What do you do? And I'm like, oh, I work in advertising. So I remember sitting in the show, listening to these stories, and I'm like, I'm going to come up with an idea. I'm not allowed to get up out of the seat until I come up with an idea.
Wow.
And so I sort of thought about my passions. I thought about the jiu-jitsu community in general and the sport itself, how quickly it was growing.
Yes.
Even in the early, it has grown immensely since I started training, but even back then in the late 2000s, jiu-jitsu tournaments could get really big. And that was like the Grappler's Quest heyday. They've sort of faded away a little bit, but you could go to some of those tournaments and they were even bigger than some of our biggest Tapcancerout tournaments. So it was this feeling of like, man, there's all these people in this community, in this sport, which is a very misunderstood sport, and has some really amazing people in it, and some of the best sportsmanship, I had ever seen. But it wasn't being activated in a way to create a meaningful difference in the world. It was creating a difference in our lives, the sport and the camaraderie and all that stuff. It was changing people's lives. They were losing weight. It was addressing mental illness. It was doing all these things, but like you go to tournaments and you just see booths to buy shorts and rash guards and stuff. Like, where's the booth for the charity that is activating all these people? So I was like, why don't I create a jiu-jitsu nonprofit? Awesome. So I thought of the name originally, Tap Out Cancer, now Tapcancerout. I didn't really have a concept, but I pitched it to my buddy the next day on our way to the airport. And he's like, oh, I love it. I'm in, I'll be your first board member, all that sort of stuff. So we were off and running. We didn't really figure out what it would be until we hosted our first tournament. So this is 2010. We got everything started and approved in 2011. But we hosted the first Tapcancerout BJJ Open in 2012. And that's when we realized we had a good business model. And I totally stole it from that team and training model that I had done in the half marathon. Why can't I apply this model to jiu-jitsu? So yeah, sure. That's what I did. Yeah. And it can be applied to any sport. And that's what I always try to stress to people. Like, if you have a passion in a different sport or even an activity, whatever, something that brings a lot of people together, just use this model. Exactly. So we were off and running, and then we just kept adding tournament after tournament. And I was, nights and weekends, grinding away at all this until, in 2017, we hosted 5 tournaments. And it basically used up all my vacation days that year to, I would have to take every Friday off, go get the truck, load everything into the truck, bring it to the venue, set up, host the event on Saturday, drive back on Sunday. And then I was back in the office on Monday. We would spend a longer time when we went to the West Coast for our San Diego tournament. So I'd take a few days off there. So, it was really, I was burning the candle at both ends. But, I just started to notice myself withdrawing a lot from the advertising world and spending more time just sitting in my office, getting my work done, hurrying to get my work done so I could work on Tapcancerout stuff, and not really caring about the rest. And so I'm like, okay, I think this is the point where it's the tipping point, okay, do I do this full time? Or do we just sort of sit here at 5 tournaments and, giving, $500K a year to a single beneficiary, which is nothing to shake a stick at. Sure. But, there's obviously a lot of untapped potential, tons of cities we've never been to, countries we've never been to. So I said, it's pretty obvious where my passion lied and what I really wanted to be doing and what made me happy and what didn't make me happy. So we formulated a plan for me to step away from my role at the ad agency and do Tapcancerout full time. It meant adding a whole bunch of events, certainly much more than 5. We had 11, I think, in our first year. Wow. So the summer before our first tour is when I scale. Wow. Full-time Tapcancerout. And then we had our first tour, which was 7 cities in 8 weeks. And we were off and running. And so we sort of understood the model and just started adding more events. We did 13 in 2019. And then, last year happened, but we had more than 24 events on the schedule, different types of events and things like that. So it just sort of snowballed. But, a lot of people from an entrepreneurial perspective, a lot of people think once you come up with the idea, you have to quit your job and then go after it and eat ramen every day and whatever. And that wasn't the case for me at all. I knew that it was a viable business model, but number one, I wanted to get better at hosting events. And when you're only hosting 2 a year, by the time, we host 1, and then by the time I get to the next event, I'd pretty much forgotten how to run an event, and then I have to relearn it all over again. But, I had a wife and kids and a mortgage and all those things. So I wasn't going to take that leap until I knew it was going to be viable. So I waited as long as I could. And then it was a fairly smooth transition, actually. I was able to go part-time at my agency and sort of part-time at Tapcancerout before we went full time. So it was different than the typical narrative of an entrepreneur.
Right.
So I always want people to understand that there's a lot of different ways to go, to turn your passion into a full-time gig. And it doesn't mean sacrificing everything in your life. That doesn't mean there was not hard work involved. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of late nights and things like that, but in sort of dual lives. But there wasn't as much risk than you would expect.
So I appreciate that answer for so many reasons. And I literally had notes to myself to address a couple of those things. But I'll take a step back and be more specific. So I had a note here that it's, I think it's important to tell people if they inspire you, that they inspire you. But I think moreover, it's important to tell them why. And I was going to use this opportunity to tell you that you inspire me. And I was going to give you a specific example. And you said it. So here we go. While I was volunteering last year at the Philadelphia showcase, we had a 2-second conversation. I think I asked you a little bit about how you brought it to scale. How did you go from a full-time job to this? And this is why we were either loading or unloading a truck, tired for sure. And you're like, well, John, we did this. And then we did this till 11. And then, you drive on the weekend and go to work and everything you just detailed. And that I thought about that for hours. It rang in my head because I have a full-time job and 100 passions I pursue every day. And I fit them in before work and after work and every minute. And I'm also a father and I have a mortgage and a husband. And you were so inspiring to me at that time because you were a living example of somebody, because I'm like you. And it doesn't align with the traditional narrative of an entrepreneur. You took the words out of my mouth of leap and the net will appear. I also can't operate that way. I have responsibilities. I have responsibilities I take very seriously, but I also am extremely passionate and fueled. So I think there's a way to do it pragmatically. And you were the first person I had met. You see people that are successful and you're like, how do they do it? How does The Rock do it? When does he sleep? You were the first person I had met that helped make me feel that was real. And that was intangible. So let me just take this second to say, when you were sitting in a room 10 years ago or 9 years ago with all these, life changers, right? Thought creators, all these things, these difference makers, and you were like feeling insignificant, man, you've changed thousands of lives, I'm sure. But at least in that one weird engagement, at least I hope that I'm able to articulate to you that you've impacted me, man. And you made it feel real, so I'm so glad you said all of that. I really am. And it kind of also transitions me a little bit to sort of the next question too. And you touched on it a little, but as an entrepreneur, like, how were you so agile last year? Everybody was hit with COVID. Nobody had a book. You are in event planning. You're in the event planning business in large part, right? You're losing venues. Everything's unpredictable. What was it like to be Jon Thomas 11 months ago?
It was tough. Ironically, at the end of 2019, a few of my board members, and all of our board members, like most boards start, they're all people I'm personally friends with or related to, people I really trust, that have expertise in certain areas. So two of our board members, who happen to be two of my groomsmen, we had a conversation about making sure we hold some money back from our large beneficiary gift that we give, just to have a reserve for, I'll never forget, one of our board member Mark said a Black Swan event, and I had never heard of that, and I'm like, oh, but I'm like, what the hell could that be? Like, even if, I remember one year, our rally tournament was a week before a big hurricane that hit. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if that hurricane hit a week earlier, that would have just mangled our whole tournament. And could you imagine if we had to cancel an event? Oh my God, it would have been the end of the world. And meanwhile, I have 10 other successful events that year. Like, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal at all. We would have rescheduled it for the end of the tour and did it 8 weeks later or something, now it seems foolish. But then like I couldn't imagine some sort of event that would shut us down for like a year, you know, like that could shut down every event.
Right.
So I remember them like throwing it out, but I'm like, yeah, you know, I get it. And then I went ahead and gave as much money as I possibly could to Alex's lemonade stand and didn't leave a reserve behind for us because, you know, in early 2020, we got our San Diego tournament and our Phoenix tournament. We're going to be building a lot of revenue in that January timeframe anyways. We're going to be fine. Yeah. And then it all came crashing down in mid-March. You know, at the end of March was supposed to be our Connecticut tournament. So we were basically 2 weeks away from our Connecticut tournament when we canceled that event. And then obviously as time passed, every event got canceled except for our showcases. So in April and May, it was really touch and go. Now you start to calculate how much money do we have in the bank? Right. How many payrolls can we make? But you also can't just sit there and watch the money leave the bank account, you know, like you got to do something.
Yeah, activate.
So, you know, we thought of a lot of different things. Number one, we launched our Podium, which is our monthly recurring giving program, which is something that had been in the back burner forever. But you know, and last year at that time was probably the worst time to launch a program like this, but it was the most necessary time for us to do that. And that was basically activating our most passionate supporters, you know, my family members, my close friends, you know, all those people who really want to make sure that Tapcancerout prevails through all of that, to start giving on a monthly basis. And we weren't asking them to break the bank or whatever, you know, the same amount that they pay for Netflix, maybe, you know, provide in a steady gift to Tapcancerout. So we just have some predictable monthly recurring revenue that we can start to work off of. And, you know, it's rewarding for them in a lot of different ways. So we launched that program. And once we realized that there was no chance we were going to be hosting a tournament in its traditional sense in 2020, we started looking at the showcases and trying to figure out, okay, can we shift those and host them in a way that's as safe as possible? I mean, we can't ever promise to mitigate 100% of risk. In the end, there's two people that are on the mat laying on top of each other, you know, who probably don't know each other. So, but we can do everything outside of that. We can make us as safe as possible.
You put in so many controls.
No spectators. Plastic barriers. Social distancing. Check in outside. So if we could do that, we could still host, you know, the showcases. And you know, we had a full showcase card ready for Connecticut. So, you know, we moved that to August, and then we actually kept our showcase schedule as it is. Ironically, it happened to lay out in every other week increments. And we actually added a Charlotte event, so a Charlotte showcase. So a lot of our Charlotte fundraisers who had started to fundraise for that tournament could then pivot and do the showcase. So we did that. And in the fundraising, typically we tell our showcase competitors that they can fundraise, they can sell tickets, they can do both, but they can't do none. So some people will just sell a lot of tickets for us and not really fundraise, and which is fine. You know, for this with no spectators, we asked everybody, you know, fundraising is going to be critical here. We asked everybody to raise at least 400. We had over 90% participation. I mean, I can't like force people to do it, and I'm not going to check them off the card. But we had great participation in that. And then the average fundraiser for our Connecticut tournament was over 1,000. And for the rest of them were around 800. So the average raised doubled what the minimum was. You know, the typical fundraiser just at any Tapcancerout tournament is about $450. So the performance of these fundraisers was phenomenal. And I think it was a testament to the donors. And while, you know, a lot of people, I had a number of competitors say that they were hesitant about joining the showcase only because they didn't think anyone would give to their fundraiser. And I said, number one, if they don't, that's fine. I just want you to put the effort forth.
Sure.
That's all I really care about.
Yeah.
If ultimately no one in your network can give, so be it. But just put forth the effort. However, last year, people were struggling, of course, but people wanted to feel good. They wanted a reason to feel good.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of reasons to feel good.
Right.
So just donating $50 to someone's fundraiser made you feel good. And a lot of nonprofits couldn't really operate last year. And so there actually weren't a lot of opportunities to give in the typical way that there would be. So people were looking to give, to make a difference, to feel good. So we had, so that the donor response was really well, and that sort of played out in all of our metrics, and just, the average donation going up, the average fundraise going up, all that sort of stuff. So pivoting those events were crucial, and we were in adding one. And so we were able to do that. And so that was great. And then the third was, we had all of these fundraisers who had already started to fundraise for our tournament.
Sure.
How can we pivot them to continue their fundraising and have them sort of involved in an event, and not an event where we all gather together in a big group, and not even an event where they gather together as a school, because even that was, not something that we wanted to encourage.
Sure.
So, I thought about it a little bit, and actually one day on the Peloton, I came up with the idea for Global Grappling Day.
Yeah.
So this single day where everybody rolls for 1 hour. That was just the basic idea. And the 1 hour came from, so in getting my black belt, you have to go through what we call the gauntlet, which is 1 hour straight going against a fresh black or brown belt every 2 or 3 minutes or something. You get one break at a half hour to drink some water. And that was brutal and miserable, but I survived it. And so if I survived 1 hour going against all these black and brown belts who all didn't hold back whatsoever, the point is to brutalize this brown belt and to embarrass them and to make them as miserable as possible. So if I could do that, anyone can roll for an hour with their buddy. First you flow roll for 20 minutes as it is, and then you can get into it, whole thing. And so it had to be long enough that it was a little tough and out of the norm, but not like a 24-hour roll or something like that, something crazy. So, it had to be feasible. And so that was the format, and we pitched it to our ambassadors first. They loved it. They all got on board, and then we emailed it out to all of our registrants for all the tournaments that year, the people who had registered by the time, that we had to cancel their event. And even some of our showcase competitors got on board and did the Grapplethon Global Grappling Day as well. So they had fundraised prior for their showcase and then kept going for Global Grappling Day. I didn't really know what to set the goal at. I just 100,000 seemed like a nice round number, but ultimately we raised 276,000, I think, in total. About 20 of that was moved over from other tournaments, but in total, Global Grappling Day generated about 250,000 new donations awesome. That weren't attributed to any tournament, and that would not have happened if we didn't set up this event. So that was a little bit of luck, a little bit of light bulb moment, but it very much saved us and allowed us to continue throughout the year and to still have this great sum of money that we're holding on to. We haven't given it to our beneficiaries. We're holding on to it to make sure we get through this year, but we'll have it to add on top of what we give in 2021. So hopefully we give a really, really big gift at the end of 2021. So yeah, it was just being able to pivot in those ways with the podium and with the showcases and then in Global Grappling Day. But also, I was having weekly check-ins with our board. I really needed to lean on my support system to help us through this and to come up with ideas. I didn't come up with all these ideas by myself. And certainly any idea that I came up with, I needed their help to sort of frame and blow out and stuff like that. So, it was just, I was very nervous, and it was nice to check in with these people who had our best interests at heart, and really cared about making sure that Tapcancerout survived. And so, we did it. We did it. And, 2021 is still going to be a unique year. It's not like everything's going back to normal. So we have to find ways we're going to try to host our tournaments, but do them incredibly safely. We haven't hosted a tournament like this yet, so we'll see how it goes. But, it's, hopefully the worst is behind us, and we'll continue to make sure that we're hosting our events as safely as possible.
That really led me into kind of the next sort of thought for you. You really touched on, not COVID withstanding, next year, you're going to try to have some events thoughtfully and safely as possible. But you've mentioned before, the grand vision is maybe like international events. Is that something still within arm's reach? So the dream?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the mission of Tapcancerout is to motivate and empower the jiu-jitsu community to raise awareness and funds for cancer fighting organizations. But our vision is to give every grappler in the world the opportunity to fight for those in the fight of their lives. So that really drives a lot of our decision making. That is why I'm so excited about the prospect of Global Grappling Day, having that every year moving forward, because we had always tried to crack that nut of, if you aren't a competitor, number one, or even if you are a competitor, but you live in Seattle and we don't have an event within 5 hours of 10-hour drive of you or whatever. There's a lot of places, even in the continental US, where you can't conveniently get to a Tapcancerout event. How do they take part? So Global Grappling Day is that way that they can take part. But yes, we want to bring our events to everybody possible. We want to get them within arm's reach. We could continue to add US states and things like that. But one of my next goals is to get a tournament out in the UK, in London specifically, and to have our first tournament there. So we were flirting with the idea of Hawaii at first, to sort of, let's see if we can get Tapcancerout as far west as possible. But, that's still the US. And I really want an international presence. And we need to start figuring out cracking that nut as well, because it's not just about, how do we bring our whole tournament setup to another country and do that. But there's a lot of fiduciary issues going out, with somebody from the UK donating to a US based nonprofit organization. Typically they want to be donating to local nonprofit organizations, or at least those that are making a difference sort of in their community, unless you're doing like a charity water that's, addressing issues in another country. But so there's that. It's not tax deductible. Donations aren't if we're US based. So we'd really love to get a UK based beneficiary on board. So we're hoping to do that for 2022. So that way, we can commit a gift to them, and then the people in London know that the funds that they raised will be going to UK based organizations. So we have to fill, we might even have to like set up a quote unquote office out there, or have like some representative out there to make it, I don't know. There's a lot. I didn't know how to run a nonprofit when I started. And that's an important thing to understand. Like, I don't ever let not knowing how to do something stop you from doing it, especially with a nonprofit. Nobody goes to college and gets their degree in like nonprofit,
right. Management.
nobody does, so it's very much a learning process. And so when you want to do something, you say, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to bring the tournament to the UK. How do we do that? I'll talk to my board. I'll get their insight. Have any of them, who some of our board members run their own nonprofits. Have they done anything internationally? I'll go on to Google. I'll start searching there. Or we have a legal representation, so I'll talk to them, see if that, so we have a lot of resources to figure this out, but I'm not worried that we won't figure it out. So so I always like to announce things, and then that forces me to figure it out.
Just like when
when we decided to host our first tournament, I found a venue, I found a way to get mats, and that was pretty much it. And we had a date, and so I made the poster, and that was it. I didn't have referees, I didn't have volunteers, I didn't know how I was going to do the brackets, but I announced it. And so once people started registering, then it's like, okay,
it became real.
Now I got to do it. Now I got to do it, because people are expecting this event to happen. So I better do it. So we really want to start expanding. We certainly don't try to grow Tapcancerout too quickly. It was always very calculated in the way that we grow, and it doesn't necessarily, if we were to go from 26 events to 50 events next year in the US, that's not necessarily the best thing to do. And so we want to make sure we do everything in a calculated way.
It's so inspiring to hear that perspective from you, because I know current version of Tapcancerout with tons of controls. Everything is on schedule. I mean, you have it so succinct and organized. So it's just fascinating to imagine. And then I printed the poster. I didn't know the bracket. It's just amazing. And also to having had the personal perspective of having volunteered at an event, to actually, as a competitor, I think we're really at a loss of how well you're actually treating us. You guys are very understanding. You give us a lot of warning about warming up, coming back. I've had the experience pre and post COVID too. So I've seen it, post controls where it had to be 2 in a room, out, 2 out, and separate, and all these things. So I've had a unique perspective, but I would like to just encourage everybody that's ever donated, participated in a tournament or submission showcase, if you haven't volunteered at any of those events, do it. I mean, from my personal experience, and I wouldn't have known this had I not done it. It was absolutely equally as fulfilling as competing. And I never would have imagined that, because as a competitor, I know what that experience is like. And I know everything you detailed, the nervousness, and then the second it's over, I can't wait again. Can't wait. So I very much understand that. But volunteering, I've made like 15 best friends, and they're all from that Philadelphia card. And it's bizarre. I have made more connections that way. And the community, my little community, my folks at Tapcancerout expanded exponentially, because I wasn't in a selfish competitor mode, and it was about giving and coordinating. And I just really encourage every competitor, even a donor, anybody, try it. It's an awesome experience. So it's really rewarding. I definitely.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
It was awesome.
It's not easy work. It's not necessarily easy work. And so,
no, but it's fun.
We ask a lot of our volunteers, but that's good to hear. Yeah. And, for me, especially now that I'm a black belt, I'm not sure if I'll ever compete again, but I really get a lot of the same rewarding feeling from hosting these events. First of all, I get the nerves in the morning. I wake, we leave at 6:30 and get to the venue around 7. And I'm feeling just as nervous at that moment as I would be if I were competing at the tournament. So I'm terrified. We get there, things start going, but once the fights start going, it sort of all washes away, the nervousness, and then it's just into host this damn event mode. And then when it's done, it's like I just won gold. Like, it's done. We did it. We've made all of this impact. This is awesome. But I have no risk of injury, so
even
great.
Better.
So it's great, and it's I'm very, very lucky to do what I do. And I have a lot of survivor's guilt, I guess, because, not only can not everyone turn their passion into their full-time endeavor,
Sure.
although you'd be surprised what you can turn into a full-time endeavor. I want people to understand that. But some people don't even know what their passion is. And I didn't even know, like, even when I came up with the idea for Tapcancerout, I didn't necessarily, like, I wasn't super passionate about building a nonprofit at that point. I was motivated to make a difference.
Right.
But for years, I told people I would never do this full time. For years. That sort of carnival lifestyle of going city to city I just couldn't imagine myself traveling 8 straight weekends, being in the airport 8 straight weekends, hosting all these events. And then I was doing it. And it was both as awful as I thought it would be, but not as bad as I thought it would be as well. So just that the fact that I was able to find something that I truly am passionate about is I feel very lucky, and I only hope that everyone else can do that. So
yeah, that's amazing. It's so inspiring. And again, at least for me, you're a living example of that. So it's very real and it can be done. It's so cool. I guess, I'll obviously include all your contact information, but can you sort of share with me a little bit, like, where anybody can reach out for any inquiries about Tapcancerout, you personally, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty accessible. So whether you go to the Tapcancerout website and fill out a contact form, or you just find us on Instagram or Facebook and DM us, you'll reach myself, Dave, or Becky. We're the only 3 that monitor those accounts. So you can get a hold of us. And if you want anyone specifically, you can just message and say, hey, I'm looking for Becky specifically, or whatever. So, but you can also find me personally on Instagram. It's _Jon T, JONT. Tapcancerout.org is the website, and all the information's there.
Awesome. Before I let you go, I'm just gonna make you feel uncomfortable and tell you again, man, you've really inspired me, and I'm telling you, you've changed my life. Your organization's changed my family's life, in more ways that I could probably ever even verbally tell you. But thank you. I just have a million thank yous for you, with that, thank you for joining me and sharing all of this. And I'm so excited to share with everyone else. My pleasure.
Man. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad we can have that impact.
Man, thank you. Again, this is True Story with Jon Thomas. Thanks again, Jon.